As you can see from the whiteboard, I've got a kid, and I've been thinking recently about how the parallels between world building and child rearing. So, like it or not, here are 8 ways in which world building is like raising a kid. Number 1, it's okay to hold their hand. A new world is a scary place, and kids need to learn to walk before they can run, and they need to hold their hands before they can learn to cross the street. So take your time with your audiences as an author to teach them the ways of the world. Spending that extra time is what establishes trust between the author and the audience itself. And parenting is what helps securely bond the child to you, so that builds that foundation for love, and it buys authors goodwill with their audiences themselves if they spend the time to really build that bond between them, and they're early on when they establish the rules to the world itself. It is impossible to look cool while you're holding someone's hand, but you're parents now, so you're never going to look cool again. So spend that little extra effort at the beginning to help the kids learn to cross the street by holding their hand. Because 2, we hold their hands so we can eventually let go. The goal is so the kids won't need you anymore. We are teaching them with all the things that we do, and they are internalizing all the ways of the world by what we teach them. So hold their hands when you can to teach them to cross the street, because we hope that they'll be able to cross the street and stop and look both ways on their own someday. Same is true with when we tie their shoes and wipe their butts. So, producers are actually notorious about not trusting their audiences, and so a lot of times in Hollywood it's like, well, do they really understand this? We should reiterate the rules one more time. Like, do they understand the character's motivation? Let's have them state it overtly in the finale as if the audience doesn't understand and hasn't spent the last hour and a half with us. And I've been working with China companies a lot recently, and so it's in Beijing as well, not just a Hollywood thing. Authors, though, it really is all about holding their hands so you can let go. We need to learn to trust our kids and our audiences, so there is a time to let go. Number 3 is no matter how hard you work at it, how long you hold their hand, they're still going to get some things wrong. This world is still new to kids and audiences, so they're going to make mistakes. These mistakes can be kind of factual, as in, well, you never told me I had to look both ways before I crossed the street, despite you damn well did 1,000 times. Or in the conclusion of what the things that they're learning is in, well, we cross the street to make sure that monsters don't get us. That was not the point of that, but I'm glad you're looking both ways. In world building, let's say that we wanted to make them understand that elves are left-handed. Factually, they'd be like, you never told us elves were left-handed, though you probably did. And B, the conclusion of, well, elves are left-handed because, they're inferior. That's not at all what it was intended. How you deal with the audiences or your kid when they misbehave or don't do the things that you want them to is the next part in that. If you want to dig deeper into it, my second book, I actually have a chapter based on that, so I won't waste any more time here. But it is how often this occurs. So let's say the kid keeps misbehaving, or people keep getting it wrong. If one person gets this world building detail wrong, you can chalk it up to them or a kid just being a kid. But if it happens over and over and over again, you might need to reevaluate your parenting or world building strategies to make sure that you're doing the right one. 4, consistency is key. Emily Oster had a book about child rearing that I loved reading about, and she basically pointed out that if you look at the statistics, all the discipline styles you can adhere to all yield the same results if they're done consistently. No jumping around, just trying out a new one after a week, or just switching between them, as I see a lot of parents do, and have definitely had to keep myself from doing myself. Kids love routine, they love their bedtime, they love all the rituals that go with all that kind of stuff, and consistency is one of the ways you create that secure bond with your kids. Same is true with audiences and the world. We hold everything constant so that the kids can explore the new stuff. So as long as they understand that this is a solid rock, we don't have to think about that, we don't have to figure that out, then we can explore the new things that are being brought into the world each day. Same is true with world building and audiences, which is one of the things about analog cultures. We keep those constant in our world building equations so that the fantasy conceits can be examined by the audiences themselves. I have another video about that, hopefully the link's in the bottom if I remember to put it there. Inconsistencies for children are, they either confuse the young kids about why did you say this one thing but you did the opposite. You said no candy, but then I see you eating candy. It doesn't make sense to me. or when they get a little older, they can actually note the hypocrisy. So, you can tell your audience one thing and then do the other as long as they don't catch you, kind of like parenting right there. In world building, consistency is one of the 4 Cs of world building. There's another link hopefully under that if you really want to catch up on that. And as we note, I've done some surveys on it, and inconsistencies are some of the top ways that you can destroy the immersive experience for audiences. 5, actions are more important than words. If you see your kid walking towards the stove, you're going to run and intercept them instead of saying, "Don't touch that stove, it's hot." Same as if you see them about to jump on the dog, let's say, hypothetically, you try to intercept them before they land on the dog. You can actually use both of them. You're usually probably saying, "Don't you touch that stove," as you're running at them, but again, action is more important than words. The same time, to learning to tie their shoes. You do it, you demonstrate it when they want to learn, you show them, you hold their hands as you do it, instead of just saying, well, you take the right loop, the right string, you put it over the left string, and that's not going to get them anywhere. So this is a lot like the show don't tell that is often bandied about in writing, which is actually an old screenwriting rule because screenplays and movies are visual mediums, so as such you really need to show the things rather than tell them because telling is boring. But a lot of world building can happen within books in which you can tell. So there's a time and a place for both, and the question is actually knowing when. Because number 6, you can explain after the fact if there is interest. Again, like don't touch the hot stove or jump on the dog. It's because it will burn you, and that hurts the dog. We can explain these things after the fact if the child is interested in an explanation. This is kind of like inside out of world building. This comes from the RPG community, and which is another video, possibly in the links, I don't know. But they care about how it pertains, in role-playing games, gamers cared about the world building so long as it pertained to their individual campaign that they're running in that night. And as time went on, their desire to know more about the world expanded because their world kept opening up and getting bigger and bigger. So that's kind of like the interest. The interest was raised in the audience, or the gamers. The same is true of audiences in world building, fantasy, and otherwise. They're absorbing every little detail, and then so they can extrapolate it later. That is involved with their interest. Infodump is not bad. I know we all supposedly hate it, but as Sanderson has pointed out, and I actually wrote an article for Fantasy Hive about, infodump equity is when they actually crave the information itself about the world building, and we can actually sit them down and explain it to them. But you can only do that after the fact if they're safe and haven't burned their hands and want to learn about it. But when they want to learn about it, number 7, don't fall down a why hole. Kids reflexively say why, and it can drive you nuts. And it's a parent's job to know if there's real interest in it, as in if it's good time for an explanation, or are they just saying that to get under your skin, or just because they say why every 15 seconds, not speaking from experience. This can also, if there is interest though, this can snowball, and it can lead to things that are not inside-out world building, as in doesn't really pertain to this moment. One example, my kid saw a helicopter, said, "Oh, it's an ambulance helicopter." I said, "No, it's an army helicopter." Why? What does that mean? And all of a sudden, well, this is what an army is. This is what it. 5 minutes later, I'm explaining why W. Bush's daddy issues led to the invasion of Iraq after the first invasion in the 90s. Not really anything he needed or wanted to know, but I kept wanting to explain it, and the same is true for authors. You got to be able to ascertain if they want this information, is it good for the audience, and before you actually go down that why hole. Sometimes it's really useful, other times it's a cavern and you fall into the crevasse and no one comes out alive. Number 8, pay off your promises. If you've promised a pancake breakfast, you can't wake up that morning and say, "I'm hungover, Daddy's not making you pancakes." You better make pancakes. If you say we're going out for ice cream that afternoon, you can't say, "Why don't we just get some popsicles out of the freezers?" Once you've made a promise, you better pay it off. The same as in world building. If you have promised that this is a world of high fantasy with dragons and elves and everything, the audience better damn well see those elves and dragons. In screenwriting, this is called the promise of the premise. And that was from Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, and the idea, if you're coming into this movie to do this one thing, if I'm coming in for an action movie, I better see action. If I'm coming in for a romance, there better be romance. Personally speaking, this week I'm adapting a short story for a film for a Chinese TV show, and the director wisely pointed out, he said, you have this science fiction conceit, and it's in the opening and it's in the finale, and we don't see it in the middle whatsoever. And I said, you are right, sir. We need to really find a way to incorporate it in there. It doesn't mean that your fantasy conceit has to be in every single moment, but it should suffuse the world itself so that it all comes up as often as possible, and you can explore it and extrapolate it in depth. So yeah, there's probably more to these, but my kid and I are both sick right now, which is probably a moral right there in and of itself about world building and parenting. But so there you go, 8 ways that world building is like raising a child. I hope you can use them to build some better worlds.